Do, 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 do. Make sure. Hello. Ah, everything's falling now. Okay. All right. Hello, hello, hello. Oh, good. Chat room is working. And now we wait and see what's up. Okay. Well, now I know that it works on Patreon. So we're just going to chill out until more people show up. Welcome, welcome. When you do come in, just say hi in the chat room. And that way I know who I'm talking to. And then we'll go from there. Hello, Mr. Oh, there we go. Michael's in. Let's see. Yes, Lilith. Lilith is being helpful. Yay! Okay. Just gonna wait to get things populated. Oh, well, welcome, Marcus. I hope that what we go over today is going to be helpful to your practice. So can everybody hear me okay? This live streaming stuff I'm still getting used to. My voice is echoing. Okay. Let me see what that might be. Do. I wonder what that is. Okay, so my voice is okay. So everything sounds good. Yay! Okay, yay! I'm excited. This is really fun software for me to mess with. So, and this is what we're going to be using for the event. So I'm really excited, and for Halloween. So my hope is that I'll just do more live streaming stuff in general, because it usually is the the easiest way for me to crack through, because I hate doing pre-prepared content. Kind of drives me nuts. So this is fun. Okay, I am going with my tanks. Yeah, you know what? Let me turn some fans down and at least one of the tanks. We'll go from there. Hopefully that's a little better. Okay. Yeah, I do have a room that is full of plants and animals, and I did just lose a turtle today, and that kind of sucks. But not a turtle, a frog. My tortoise is okay, but I lost one of my fire frogs. So anyway, so hopefully this works. All right, so shall we get started? So today we're going to talk about spirit guides, and I'm really excited because of course I don't have it with me, but in the boxes, if you are getting a box, you are getting a bunch of spirit guide stuff. So there's going to be a bath that comes with it, and a candle, and then what I refer to as an SOS candle for spirit guides, and it's where there's a little delay there. There we go. Okay, like, what are you saying? Oh no, to my frog. And we're going to get a pen when these freaking pens show up. Ironically, I ordered something from China like way after I had ordered the pens, and I know that it's arriving tomorrow, so I don't know when the pens are going to get. So hopefully this week they're getting in. So as soon as those pens get here, they're going in boxes, and those are being shipped out. But all of this is to, like, everything that I created for it is there to help you get closer to your spirit guides and develop a relationship with your spirit guides. And the thing with this really is that, to me, I think it's really important that we understand, as a general rule of thumb, we always make any sort of mediumship way more complicated than it actually needs to be. And this really does come from, I mean, years of teaching, but also just years of having my own experience as a medium and working with just spirit guides are kind of their own type of mediumship, and we'll get into that here in a second. But as somebody who talks to spirits a lot, I find that we have an issue making things way complicated when these are often very natural experiences that you're going to have. It's often going to be something that, kind of presents itself in a way that if you're able to really be in the moment and pay attention, you're going to be quite successful in having, those interactions on a very regular daily basis kind of way. What we have to be really careful about is taking things beyond into a place of like where unverified personal gnosis, which is, we'll talk about that too, is something that we allow to rule and dictate our practices. And when it comes to anything spirit related, it's really easy to get into the world of unverified personal gnosis and have to kind of struggle with that, because unverified personal gnosis is going to be a big part of what you do as a mystic and as a witch. It's just going to be part of the work that you do. But on the same hand, it's also going to be something that is easy to kind of fall into and create fantasy around. We want to avoid that at all costs. And so when it comes to spirit guides, it's really easy to go into that fantasy place and not really have really the support necessarily in your own practice that gets you to the next level with that. And so spirit guides really can be complicated if we want them to be, but I think in their very nature, they're not. They're probably the easiest type of spirits that you can work with. If you are beginning mediumship, one of the things I always recommend people is that you start with your spirit guides, because they are spirits, and it's kind of like having a workout buddy, and so you get to go and do, any sort of work, even if you can just take 30 minutes, 20 minutes a day, tune into your guides, or just kind of throughout the day tune in with your guides. It's like having a partner in your craft, and that is a super valuable, amazing, incredible thing. Now, that all being said, sip my tea here. Sip my tea before I spill it. It is because anything in the craft is capable of being just filled with crap. Spirit guides tend to be one of those things. And so when I first started my craft, spirit guides were something that people talked about, but they talked about in this way that was more about everybody's got them. They're all here to help us. What we need to do is to keep that information to ourselves. That was a big thing, because it was like your guardian angel, your spirit guides were this ever-present thing that was there, and you weren't supposed to talk about them, because by talking about them, you kind of you diluted that connection, because you were adding more psychic energy to it by other people tapping in. And that made sense to me when I first started out. And then as I moved from books to taking classes and working with people who were really, really, really into spirit guides, I noticed that we have this ability to, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm actually following along with what you guys are typing, but I see it, I think, later than what you guys are actually saying it. So I'm like, what are they talking about as I'm reading your thing? So let me pull it back. So we weren't supposed to talk about them. That was a big part of the way it used to kind of work. But then as we kind of went into the 90s and then the early parts of the 2000s, spirit guides became a really big part of the shamanic movement. We'll say the modern shamanic movement, the neo-shamanic movement. And then that just became part of the craft and a big deal. So then suddenly we went from nobody talking about spirit guides to everybody was talking about spirit guides. And everybody had their own kind of way of doing it. So I went to a couple classes back in the day, and I had a spirit guide teacher who, that was her thing. She just taught spirit guides and how to work with them. And the whole experience was, it was like being led, it was like going to court and watching a lawyer like lead a witness through like a testimony. There was a lot of that, and I just felt like, well, if like I understand like, if we're gonna go meet a spirit guide that we specifically need to work with for, like, let's say our careers, I can understand that kind of a thing, going and having a relationship with it and so on and so forth. But for me, I always expected it to be deeper and for the work itself to present itself in a more personal way. So when I'm in this class and she's taking us through meeting it was a very generic, but it was all like, let's go here, and then you're going to go here, and then you're going to meet your guide. What does your guide look like? And there's a lot of pressure. It was a whole lot of pressure. And anybody who's heard me talk about Moloch before and how I met Moloch and how he became part of my life, y'all know that it was very kind of accidental. So I guess maybe not all of you do know that. So I guess I'll share that story real quick. So Moloch is my familiar. I refer to him as my familiar. But he really is a spirit guide that kind of evolved into fulfilling this other function for me. And I met Moloch when I was about 19, like officially met him when I was like 19. And I had a guide that I had worked with forever named Paul. And Paul was just really sweet, kind of Mr. Rogers-esque, like, would always show up like a white dude with, that Mr. Rogers hair, and he'd have a vest on. And he was really helpful when it came to working with the dead, especially, and helping me as a medium make those connections and deliver that information in a way to people that was going to be helpful. And he was also very protective when I would find myself in spiritually compromising situations. And so I loved Paul. Paul was really sweet. I'll totally talk about Paul some other day. But Paul just kind of disappeared one day. And Paul was one of those spirits that I could feel, like, be driving in my car, and I did a lot of driving between Cincinnati and Columbus when I lived in Ohio. And so like every weekend I was in my car driving up to Columbus from Cincinnati. And so, that's a 2.5-hour drive or so. And I would just talk to spirit guides the whole time pretty much. And one day Paul just disappeared. So it was like always having somebody in your backseat, and then suddenly there was nobody in your backseat all of a sudden. It was very weird. And there was this noticeable absence. It was like having a friend that you always hung out with forever, and then suddenly that friend's not there. And it felt really weird to me. And so for the first time in my life, because again, I have this weird connection to all of this stuff, for the first time in my life, it was really like, oh, I don't hear anything. Like, that was the first time. It was 19 years old. Suddenly there wasn't a spirit I could feel, or especially not Paul. And Paul had been around in a very real way for a very long time. And I kind of freaked out. And so I went through several weeks of not knowing really what to do or how to do all of it. This idea of living life without a spirit guide, because I thought, well, everybody's got them. Why don't I have one now? Where did Paul go? Paul didn't even say goodbye. And it was this really kind of, heart-wrenching kind of experience for me. So I ended up going forth and trying to discover where I might find a guide elsewhere. So I took all these classes. There was a lot of this leading the witness kind of stuff. I would walk away being like, okay, well, I met something, but did I just imagine it because you were taking me to this thing that I was supposed to imagine and vision up? Or is this an actual spirit that's trying to make its way through? And when we talk about this, it's really interesting because often in witchcraft, in neo-paganism and in witchcraft today, when we think of spirits, it still tends to be in a very shamanic kind of way, which is great. And I think that allows us to develop those deeper relationships. But at the same time, it strips the psychic stuff right out of it, I think, honestly. So you know, as a medium, there's a certain degree of requirement that I have when I'm working with a dead person. I have to be able to like give information, and there's certain things that I would have to do, or I would be a hack and I would have been called out years ago. You can't really do that with spirit guides necessarily, right? Like you're not necessarily going to be able to find out like, oh, this spirit guide came from this place and was this person in another lifetime that was connected to you. I mean, all that could be possible, but that's not necessarily going to be verifiable in the same way that like working with another type of spirit can be. So spirit guides, you know, I think like in that experience with going to the teacher and being led through this thing, I think the work tended to really rely on there being a narrative that you follow throughout the work of meeting your spirit guide. And without that narrative, you're kind of shit out of luck, right? And so, and what I tried to do in my books for the Witch Power series, especially when we go to meet spirits in the Witch's Book of Spirits, I tried really hard to use that to the best of my advantage as an author. So I was like, well, I know if it, you know, when I read a book, if it's, especially if it's a fiction book, if it's written well, I am transported. I am totally taken away. And I know that that experience that I'm having is very similar to what I have when I'm all being psychic and all my stuff is turned on. And so, you know, it's all about the mind and the mind being allowed to set itself up and to navigate where it needs to go and how it wants to go. And so, you know, we have this shamanic kind of lining to everything with spirit guides, and I think that that's beautiful and brilliant and amazing and can be like really, really cool. But at the same time, we can't necessarily just throw out all of the psychic experience. You can't necessarily throw out all the psychic development that comes from working with the spirit guide, because it isn't all you entering trance and meeting a spirit and communicating, and for all you know, it could be part of your imagination. And that's something that I think is, in general, very important, that you know as a psychic and as a witch, that this could all be in your mind. And if it is all in your mind, then you got to be really careful about what you're creating for yourself, right? Because my whole thing is I'm a realist, and so, you know, I'm like, okay, what if this is all bullshit, and I am just talking to imaginary friends, and, you know, I would have spent my entire life building this practice that ended up affecting other people because I wrote books, right? And what if it's all bullshit? And having that whole like moment is what was kind of a you know, kind of thing. And for me, the answer was like, well, let's say worst case scenario, these are figments of my imagination, these spirit guides, these things that I'm working with. Well, what does that, you know, worst case scenario, what does that lead us to? Well, it leads us to the reality that you're doing, at the very least, shadow work, right? You are connecting to your subconscious. You are doing work that is deepening your understanding of yourself and your relationship to the literal and physical universe. So yeah, exactly. It can be very anxiety provoking, right? And so for me, this is stuff that like I can't avoid, because I'm so into the literal understanding of nature through a scientific lens. Oh, I'm seeing people leave. Oh no. But for me, it's, that can be a really, you know, that stuff can as you're saying, James, can create anxiety just thinking about what if this is all fake. Well, it's okay if it is. It's okay. And I mean, like, if that's what it all boils down to, then are you doing stuff that's actually like helping you? Awesome. And that's the same thing with spirit guides. And so when we're thinking about this, it's okay if you want to approach it very slowly from a super rooted in reality kind of place where spirit guides are possibly just a figment of your imagination. I think it's okay to approach that. And I actually think you get better results this way, because then you have those spirits proving to you as the channel, as the psychic, that they're real, right? So they take on a life of their own. And you can see that become something that every medium struggles with, no matter what you're doing. Every medium is going to struggle with this idea of, you are talking to spirits. Are they real? Can you trust what you're feeling and experiencing? Those are super, super important conversations to have. And a lot of the times we say, oh, just have faith, or just da-da-da. And I'm like, faith isn't always good enough for me, right? And I can tell you, in my experience, these things are real. These spirit guides are real. These energies that we're working with are real. And they may start off in my mind, because that's how I can observe them, right? That's how I can acknowledge that they exist, because they pop up in my mind. And, you know, that may be where they start, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's where they exist, okay? And so one of the big things that we have to remember when we're talking about spirit guides in any context are that generally speaking, when we say spirit guides can do no wrong, they're not going to lead you astray. The reason for this is that they are intricately attuned to what we refer to as your higher self. And so they're not going to necessarily going to lead you wrong. This also brings up a really interesting theory with spirit guides, which is one that I tend to kind of follow, which is that your spirit guides are going to be beings that come to you different times, different areas in your life when you have things pop up, and they may not be there forever, but you're also going to have spirit guides that are around for a really long time. And so being able to be fluid with this understanding that you may have a spirit guide pop up, present itself to you, where is it coming from? Is it coming from the higher self? And that's kind of one of those tests that we'll end up kind of talking about here in a little bit when we're testing out spirit guides. But I think it's really important to remember that, it's going to be in your head. It's going to feel that way, especially if you're somebody who isn't natively psychic. Like if you don't have that ability just kind of as part of your makeup, it's going to be a difficult experience, right? And so I'm speaking to you people first. I'm speaking to the people who have tried really hard to work with spirit guides but can't get around the mental idea of it, have talked themselves out of being able to experience this because they didn't get a big flashy phenomena, right, kind of moment. We don't get those as psychics. And so, when it comes to spirits, you have to accept, whether it's spirit guide, it's an angel, it's a demon, it's a fairy, it's whatever, that at some part of it is going to be just in your mind. And if you can't accept that, then we're going to struggle with that. Now, the reason why it's in your mind is because the mind is where we get to interface with it. It's just that simple, right? And so if you are, and this is why I harp and throughout all of the books really, really hard on this idea of getting your shit together and knowing what your strengths and your weaknesses are, because spirits are going to use those weaknesses against you. Well, how do they know what's going on? Because they're in your head, right? Like when we watch The Exorcist and, Linda Blair is done spitting pea soup, and then she looks at the priest and she's all, your mother sucks cocks in hell, and then changes into her voice and does all that. That's all because the spirit was able to get into its head. All that comes from myth. All of this comes from the stories that we've collectively had as a species when it comes to dealing with the spirit world. So we know that spirits are going to use our weaknesses against us. We know that spirits are going to do what they can do to get the upper hand in the relationship. The only time this isn't true is when it comes to spirit guides, but it's also really important that you vet the spirits when they're coming through before you really accept them as a spirit guide. Let me give you a horror story, okay? So, yay, just in time for Halloween. So the horror story is a real one, and that is my first true experience running into a demon that was attached to a person. And guys, I don't believe in this shit usually. Like, I write about the stuff, I do believe it because I'm writing about it, but that all comes from an experience. Like, I don't just walk in going, everything's real. I'm like, no, prove it to me, universe. And so the time the universe proved to me that demons were real, I had a client come in, and I had seen her a couple times, and there was always something a little weird about her, but I didn't really tap into what it was. And every time she'd come to see me, we were always focused on something very specific, and we'd have 15 to 30 minutes. We never really did a deep, long session. So she got me for her son for his birthday. And so she came in, and I knew that she was coming in with him. And I remember sitting in my office just kind of waiting for the appointment to show up to start. And I remember about 10, 15 minutes before it did that this spirit showed up, and it was the spirit that this kid, her son, was coming to see me to talk about. And I thought that's what the session was going to be about. And Malik was just very unhappy. He was very uppity that day. And I felt uppity and kind of unsettled, and something just wasn't right. And so the closer towards the appointment, the more this feeling of this kind of shared anxiety just got, built up, and it was intense. And so finally, client comes in with her son, and I, pretty instantly go right into this guy who had popped up. I mean, he had a thing in his head, and it was a big deal. And so, we start talking about the spirit that was already there. And the whole time, Malak keeps going over to this woman who's just there to, support her son, keeps going over to my, my original client, this woman, and he keeps like pointing at her. And I'm like, what the fuck is this about? And I kept seeing him like pointing at her and pointing at her. And I was like, okay, what is he pointing at her? And it happened so much, and it was always in the same area, pointing at her ear. I'm like, what the fuck is this? So it gets so annoying that it's like unavoidable. You just kind of have to stop and just really tune in. And so I tune in, and I see that there is some weird thing, like I don't want to say, it was like a smoky tentacle kind of thing. This is how I visualized it. Showed up and was kind of attached to this woman. And I ended up having to, I'm like, well, what the fuck is this? And so I go even further. And it was like the minute I tapped it, it rang. It was like a spider web. It was like the minute I tapped it, this thing just like kind of showed up. And it was incredibly tall. I would say like 6'8". Like it was a tall thing. And it was just exactly what you think. Like in the, and this is obviously to some degree has been filtered by my mind, right? My mind, I'm into demons and demon movies and all this shit. So I know that to some degree, what I'm visualizing has got to be my mind filling in the blanks, right? So there's an aggressive spirit. It is showing up as something that looks like a cross between a Benicio del Toro, character and something from Buffy, right? Like it was really, really just, and it was just yelling at her. Like it was calling her a whore and telling her she was useless and she wasn't going anywhere, and that this is, men are always, it was just it was very bad. Very, 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 very bad. Kept going on and on and on. And once you feel it, you can't unfeel it. Like that's the other thing about all of this. And so this is happening. Malik is just, he's been in fluff, like all, he's like, I always visualize him as an owl. He's a fluffy owl all day. So he's very upset about something. And when this is happening, he was just all over the fucking place. And I realize that this thing is kind of starts bragging to me about how it needs her, or she needs it, and that he's already got another bitch, and that he had been with, he'd been there for 7 years, and when he's done with her, he's going to move on to this other bitch. And he was like, it was like talking to this gross, abusive thing. It was just this gross, abusive thing. I mean, it was obviously human, but it wasn't human. It was just really, really fucked up. Really hard to explain. And so I was able to extract that it was like 7 years that it had been with him, or been with her, and that it was attached itself to another female in the house. And so I convey this information to both of them, and the young man that was there says, "Oh shit, my girlfriend's been living with us," and pretty much like right after she moved in, she got really sick, and she's been in bed the whole, for about 3 months. This is the same problem that my original client had been having, where she was sick for a very long time. Nobody could really figure out what was going on. And when I said, well, what happened 7 years ago? Because this thing is saying it's been with you for 7 years. And she said, well, I was in a battered women's shelter 7 years ago, living in Texas. And so that stuck out to me as this, oh, fuck moment. Like, okay, so it's the way that it was talking, the way that it was moving. Dominating things. It was really, really aggressive. And so it just made, to me, that totally clicked and made fucking sense. So I gave her instructions on how to get rid of it and so on and so forth. But the thing that I bring this up, the reason why I bring this up, is that it had attached itself. So energetically, a spirit is going to kind of come in and out in a kind of area on you. And usually for most of us, like 98% of us, that's in the back of your head, on your neck. And so and we also refer to this spot as like your blowhole. Okay, so when you are full of energy will express itself through there, just like pressure, being released from a blowhole. And so it's like your little pressure valve. And that is right around in that spot is usually what a lot of psychics, when they're feeling a spirit coming in, or they're feeling an energy around you, or an energy that's connected to you, most of the time that's what it is. They're feeling it in kind of the head space, like the back of the neck. We all work a little differently, but that seems to be what all of us kind of agree is like, oh, there's something on the back of your neck, or there's something that's up here somewhere. So usually the ears, the back of the neck, the head, this kind of area, that's usually where we get spirit guides and things like that. So what I thought was interesting was that this demon, this demonic influence, had connected itself through the same point on her body and in her energy body that a spirit guide would have connected itself. And that totally made me rethink everything about human about the human experience in general. Really, it made me really think about, okay, so these things have these influence over our behavior. They've influence over our interest and our talents and the way that we express ourselves. And if you can get something that's that dark and negative that's coming in through the same spot on the energy body where something positive should be coming in, we got a problem there, right? But it also means that the energy body accepts that spirit in that same way. And so it's kind of like if we think of, cells accepting or rejecting. I often think of the energy body like a human cell, and if you think of, there are things that accept and reject new information that are coming in from other cells, energy that's coming in from other cells. You're semi-permeable, just like a cell wall. And I think we have to be really, really aware that these darker negative things, that though they are rare, they're also approaching and attaching themselves in the same place on the energy body that our spirit guides would be. So I think that's a really fascinating thing. That also is, it's also a good thing to do, that if you feel that you've got a spirit that's chilling out with you and you don't want it around, all that kind of stuff, or if you're worried about having a spirit attachment to something that's negative, or you don't want that spirit attached to you. Sometimes we want them attached to us, right? But if that's the case, then you can take like cascarilla, which is powdered eggshell, and you can rub it on the back of your neck, and that'll pretty much shut you down. That'll pretty much shut down the whole spirit exchange, at least temporarily. So that's a good, like, if you're out with people and somebody starts having a psychic meltdown, just shut off the little power button there and just turn it off. But cascarilla is a really good thing to do. You can also, if you're really good with energy work, you can kind of I don't know how to put it. It's almost like I put a little ball of energy, and then I'll put it right there where the back of their neck is, where that blowhole is, if they're having a hard time grounding. Because sometimes it feels like that energy is clogged. Because naturally, you can get rid of the energy that's excess. Like, that's a thing that you would naturally be able to do. So sometimes that gets, if you're like, oh, I can't do it, well, then maybe there's something wrong, right? Like, let's figure it out. So spirit guides, they come in through that same kind of space. And I think that is something to just remember, that even though these are, positive beings that are working for your highest good, so to speak, the reason why they're able to work for your highest good is that, they're ultimately connected to your higher self. And that is how you basically test all this out when it comes to, is the spirit worth your time and energy? Is the spirit somebody that you should be working with? Essentially, does it make you feel good in the mind, body, spirit way? Does it give you any heebie-jeebies? Because if it does, it's got to go. It's not actually there for you in that higher level, right? Nothing that is there for you on the higher level is going to scare you. And the argument to that is always, well, angels are scary and they're good for you. Angels are not necessarily good for you. Like, they're not. They're giant forces of nature that don't want to be fucked with. And the only time we should really, I think, actively go poke them is when you really, really, really need help and you're prepared to deal with the weirdness that comes with that. But otherwise, like, you can go and observe them, and you can, have some sort of kind of Jane Goodall kind of relationship with them. But really, angels they're not necessarily that wonderful energy that's just going to come make your life better, right? Spirit guides aren't going to do that either. So the difference between a spirit guide and a familiar gets down to what I often say is that you have itchy beard. If you have a good friend, let's say you break up with your partner, and everything sucks and and what are you gonna do? So you're having one of those moments. A spirit guide would be the friend that shows up and they are really concerned about you, so they are going to bring ice cream, and they are going to bring face masks and a good chick flick, and they're going to put it on, and they're going to tell you it's all going to be okay, and that all you need is some Rocky Road and a little bit of half naked Tom Cruise or something, and it's all going to be okay, and you'll get through this. That's like a spirit guide. They're your cheerleaders. They're there to help you. If you want to make a move, well, okay, let's gather the data. Let's make it happen. They're very positive. Whereas a familiar, on the other hand, is going to be the friend that shows up with a bottle of tequila and a pack of smokes and maybe some drugs, and they're going to say, okay, let's talk about this bastard and what he did to you, and so on and so forth. And there are times when you need the first friend, and there are times when you need the second friend, and that's just the truth. And so I like to think of, they're still there for you to be support systems and to help you, but the spirit guide has your best interest in mind, whereas the familiar spirit is not necessarily going to have your best interest in mind. And so when we develop that relationship, you're going to go get a familiar from the wild, so to speak, which is how I met Moloch. Moloch was already there. I ran into him, basically. Because of that, we have a different relationship. But if you are somebody who's like creating familiars or summoning forth familiars, then you really got to set the terms down. And that was one of the things I actually liked about I loved all of the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina on Netflix. But one of the things that was really interesting was the way that she went and procured Salem. Like, she actually went out into the woods and called a spirit forth and then waited for it to show up. That is a very, very traditional way of going about that process of getting a familiar. So familiars and spirit guides, they often intersect. They are not the same thing. So your spirit guide is there for the best of you. It's there to help you and your practice and your stuff. Whereas your familiar is going to be more of your cohort. They're going to be more of a companion that is helping you achieve your end game and is not necessarily invested in your highest good. Now, Moloch, my familiar, started off in my life as a spirit guide. So he worked with me in the psychic world for a very, very long time. And then one day it was like our work was over. Like, the thing he came to me to work on, I did. And that was okay. That was totally okay. And so we had this moment of like, well, you get used to having a presence in your life, and suddenly that presence is gone, like I was talking about earlier with Paul. And I was like, well, do you have to go? Like, this has been really cool, and I really like you, and we seem to hit it off. We seem to have a multi-life connection here, so I really would like to explore that more. Do you have to go? And he says, well, I don't have to go. I'm like, okay, well, how about we change this arrangement a little bit? And so the deal became he would get fed, whereas a spirit guide, you might light some incense or something for them. Moloch gets booze, right? And we go and we do a lot more things. I have him in my magic in a different way than I would, in the past. And it's much more of a personal kind of thing, whereas spirit guides always seemed like they were there to help lift me up and keep me going, right? But it wasn't necessarily that. Well, like I said, two different types of friends, right? So one can be both. And the reason why I did that was, first of all, I didn't even know I could. I had no clue. Moloch was the one that led me through this process. But Moloch also was really clear that, like, well, he's been working with me in that way of him being there for my highest good for all of those years. And so that's not going to change. Like, he's not going to, like, suddenly be like, well, fuck this bitch and leave me hanging. He's still there to make sure that, I'm headed where I want to go, that my dreams and my focus and those things are all in the right place. And that's awesome. That's really amazing. But that was because he started off as that spirit guide first. And so when we start talking about spirit guides and familiars, I think it's, if you do it the right way, you're going to develop a relationship with a spirit guide that, you could transfer into this other way, and you don't have to worry about the issue of, like, is the spirit going to fuck me over, right? That's because it was already a spirit guide. So, we've covered all of these different aspects of spirit guides and kind of how we as witches can work with them. I think they are a really beneficial aspect of the craft if you utilize those practices, you bring them in. I think spirit guides not only are just helpful from like a mediumship practicing kind of standpoint, but they're also really helpful in you figuring out where the hell you're going and what you want in this and why you are practicing right now, where ultimately this is going to your practice, how it is supporting your life, how it is helping you spiritually grow. And that's usually what I think of spirit guides. I think of spirit guides as being forces, spirits who are not unlike what we would think of ascended masters. I think is a good way of, ascended masters and spirit guides usually are kind of thought of as the same kind of thing in a lot of circles. But they're obviously a spirit that's there with experience, and they are there to guide you through something wonderful, right? Like if you're in a place where you are wanting change or growth, you can ask the universe, so to speak, through ceremony and ritual and things like that, to bring you close to a spirit guide that you can meet that can help you achieve those end goals. And so there's a lot of different angles here, and it really, I think, gets down to what you want, right? Like, what do you want out of a spirit guide experience? For me, I wanted something that was really intimate. I want to feel them all the time, and part of that is that I feel their absence more than I feel them. If that makes any sense? I think it's just been years of having something there, and then when it's not there, it feels really weird. So, I'm more likely to notice when something is off than I am to notice when it's right, if that makes any sense. And that's how, my relationship with them works. So I want something that's more in the undeniable, cannot ignore this, like, you are here, we are talking, we are doing stuff together kind of relationship. And to get that, it takes time and obviously practice, right? Because mediumship is something that is, it's a beautiful skill set, but it's multiple different types of skill. It's multiple different types of work together. So what I want to do is actually divide this up into 2 parts. So we will start now, and then we'll get together later on this month, and we'll kind of check schedules, and we'll go over a second part to this. But I don't want to lay on too much on you because, again, we tend to make this really complicated. So knowing everything that I just said, what I want you to do is I want you to think about the spirit guides that you already know exist in your life, and I want you to make a list of those spirit guides. Just do it, when we're done with this. Just sit down and make a list of, these are the spirit guides that I know already exist in my life. And figure out if they are spirits that have been around for a really long time, or if they are spirits that have just recently showed up, or if they're spirits that are like specific to a certain aspect of your life. And what I want you to do is to just be an observer for this time. And yeah, obviously if you want to light some candles or you want to make offerings to them to, get them that relationship kind of going, that's wonderful. But what I really want you to do is just be an observer. So much of this just requires us to observe, and we end up doing it in this kind of back wonky kind of way. So if we think of that idea of meditation, last time we were talking, when we had our last get together, we were doing the boot camp, we were talking about how, in meditation, we are talking to, well, when we pray, we talk to God. When we meditate, God is talking to us. That's what I want you to kind of do with your spirit guides. I want you to enter meditation, and I want you to just observe your thoughts, your feelings, your moods. The big thing here is that it is coming through your filters. You have to know yourself in order to be successful in doing this. You have to know the things inside of you that are going to get your attention, and why a spirit that is connected to you in an intimate way might use those things. For instance, the movie What Dreams May Come. I'll see scenes from What Dreams May Come when I'm talking to a dead person, right? And that's Moloch. That isn't the dead person. That's Moloch letting me know that I'm talking to this certain type of spirit, and that it has this type of baggage, or kind of whatever. A lot of the times, spirits will come through as movie stars to me, or they'll come through as scenes and things that I've seen. And I have a very strange, because I'm very watery, so I have all this emotion. And I really delineate between spirits based off of how they emotionally feel to me when they are present. And so, that's one thing that I had to figure out, like, because I'm different. Like, people don't talk about that kind of a thing. Whereas with me, it's like I sense this presence. I sense an angry presence. I sense a happy presence. I sense a confused presence. And then that gets more complicated, right? When they start to show you scenes, or they start to present certain things to you. So it's a really important thing that we just sit and observe. So what I want you to do over the next 2 weeks, and let's get together after this 2 weeks, and we'll touch base again. But I want you to do over this 2 weeks is be an observer. I want you to take 30 minutes out of your week at least once, and I just want you to light a candle, and I want you to say out loud, "Spirit guides, if you're here, I want you to know that as long as this candle is lit, I am listening. If there's something you want to tell me, if there's something you want to share with me, now is the time." And the more you can do that, the better. But that's all I want you to do. I want you to just say that, and then I want you to be an observer. I want you to pay attention to things like how you feel emotionally, how you feel physically. I want you to pay attention to if, suddenly things start popping up around you, like you start seeing a bunch of feathers or pennies or any of that other stuff. I want you to pay attention to that. And in the meantime, I am going to send you, if you don't already have it downloaded, an old class that I taught on spirit guides. And I just want you to go through to the Spirit Guide Profiler. There's a really good Spirit Guide Profiler that I have in the Witch's Book of Spirits. I think it's Spirits. It might be Power. And that is all there designed to help you figure out who these beings are. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I will send you this class material. I'll post it on the Patreon group. Take that material, look over it, start working through the profiler if you already haven't. But the main objective is to be an observer. So once you say, hey, spirits, make yourself known, you are on watch afterwards, okay? And it doesn't mean that everything is a spirit, but it does mean that if you start seeing things in repetition, if you start seeing things in patterns, you're not going to know unless you are observing and you're just saying, hey, universe, I'm paying attention. So that's what I want you to do over the next couple of weeks. And then when we get back together, we'll focus on taking that like really, really deep and really fleshing out any long-term connections that you would have had with the spirit previously to meeting them in this lifetime. But for now, that's what I want you to do. All right. Don't make it complicated. Keep it simple and take a step back and boom. Okay. So, I think that's gonna be it for the live stream today. Go on to the Discord and we'll keep up. We can talk about this more. If you have questions, I'd love to answer them. If you're not already on the Discord, you should go join the Discord. Okay. But yeah, so all right, everybody, thank you for tuning in. I am going to switch over to Discord and I will see y'all soon.